All right, let's talk a little bit about how search engines work. We often use the word algorithm, which can be kind of a scary word. It really just means process or routine or software to handle data and store it in such a way that can be used by complex systems. So the process for Google for deciding who shows up first doesn't go to just like one line of code. There are actually hundreds of factors that can influence ranking. But in the grand scheme of things, it really works through three different steps: crawling, indexing, and ranking. And so let's talk a little bit about what each of these is. So crawling, this is, we call this something that Google does as sort of a bot function. But what it means is when new content goes onto your website, even if it's not showing anywhere from the homepage or anywhere else, but if it's linked to in any way, or if it's included in a sitemap, then the bot, when Google looks at the website again, sees it and goes to those pages and follows them for new content. And this content in the past has mainly been text content, but now more capability is being developed for seeing into rich media. This would include pictures, videos, sound, everything, to index that type of content, to actually discern images and words and associate them essentially back to words and add them to an index. So crawling is going to continue to be a major component of search as more rich media is being used and indexed, but it's going to change how crawling happens. And right now, crawling is sort of a manual process almost. It's not manual, it's automatic. But Google has to go out and actually look at websites and see what's happening. The sitemaps are there as sort of a backup process, but at the end of the day, it's got to be one of those things, and Google still has to go look. And there's some new things coming that may streamline some of that, some shared indexes for crawling where you can post that you have new content, and there will be some systemization. But at the end of the day, it takes a long time for those new processes to catch on and to become the standard. And it takes sometimes more than a decade for a standard to be strong enough and adopted widely enough for Google or other groups to rule out less technical integrations. So crawling is probably going to be with us for a while. And it's the act of Google going out, or other search engines going out looking at all the new pages, everything that presents as a new URL on the website, and adding it to their search index. All right, next up is indexing. And this is Google essentially evaluating each page and deciding what it thinks about that page. And so this is, I think of the algorithm as software and the index as data. And so those two things interact with one another. They're sort of, two wings on an airplane, so to speak. You can't have one without the other and get anything done. So indexing is associating value with each individual page of content or a resource. It could be a PDF, and deciding where to put it in the larger universe of available pages to return as search results. There are a lot of things that can happen that would keep a page from being indexed. Number one is you telling Google and other search engines not to index it. We do this with a robots.txt file, or just having things unpublished and not available. And it's amazing how often there have been websites that went live to replace an older website, and there are problems that are left over from the developmental phase of the project. And a new website goes live, rankings tank, traffic tanks, and users are wondering, wow, this website's not available anymore. I don't know where it is. I'm not finding it in search results. And it's sitting right there on the domain, fully available if someone were to type in the domain and go directly to it. But this is a really common problem that happens with website launches, of not making the proper adjustments to a robots.txt file. And you're essentially telling search engines, don't look at this website. So that's one of the things that can happen that's pretty common. Very common mistake and error, and can really be devastating for 30 or 60 days, and you have to sort of recover from it. Another thing that happens is if the content's perceived by the index to be repetitive, if it's duplicative, it doesn't really have a chance at being indexed well. And this can happen, as we've covered above, not just because a page is duplicative, but because maybe there are two different URLs to get to that page. One could be nested within a directory, another could be not nested, and those would appear as two different URLs. And so you want to kind of figure that out, decide which one is canonical, the authoritative URL, and force your system to either use that canonical URL or spike and remove the damage from the non-canonical version. And so those are technical questions you need to work with your developers on, but that can create a problem for that page being indexed. Another one is if there are no inbound links to a new page, it will often not be indexed just because it's not discovered. So if it's not in your sitemap and you're not sharing it in your top nav, or it's not available through any set of links, any back channel kind of ways to get to it, even though it's public, but not pointed to, then it'll often not be indexed. Search engines are not really known for going in and entering every possible search into your search box and taking all those results and indexing them. So often you need to make sure that if you're loading new content into your system, that it's being indexed somewhere. And most websites, this is typically not an issue. You can have websites that have pretty standard experiences that they're offering to users, and those are inevitably going to involve some set of links to get to a page of content. But if you're dealing with vast sets of data, like a products database, it's easy to have pages of content that you assume are connected and are showing up and being indexed as quickly as you think they are. But if you have, for example, new batches of data that are coming online and then manual processes that are used to either merchandise that set of products or that content, well, then you may have some stuff that could be hidden from search indexes until it's utilized. And you may be assuming that it's being utilized as soon as it's live and on your server and available to someone typing in the correct URL directly. So think about your process and just make sure that you're not hiding something in plain sight by not pointing to it or adding it to a sitemap. And then another thing that can keep things from being indexed is a poor page experience. I'm stunned at the quality of the page experience of the domain weather.com. Weather.com's been around for years, owned by the Weather Channel. I don't know who owns them, but they recently dropped from about 3 million ranked terms to 2 million following the helpful content update. And we've seen a lot of drops in overall rankings. This would be data in SpyFu, easily looked at for any SEOs who are looking at SpyFu and using it as a tool. And I'm sure SEMrush shows some similar numbers. But anyone who is aware of sort of what's been going on in Google for the last few months is aware of the helpful content update. It matches the drop that we've seen following the helpful content update for a lot of campaigns. So Google is looking at weather.com and making an assessment and saying, hey, we really think that you're about 2/3 as valuable as we thought you were before this update. And so what's going to happen next is weather.com is either going to adjust to that or just not make any changes. And so there are consequences. There are real business consequences if you're weather.com and 2/3 of your ranking is left after an algorithm update. So this is a big deal to understand these things for businesses of any size. But a big part of the helpful content update is the user experience. And with weather.com, there's a lot of movement that happens after the first screen is painted. And that's a real negative experience for the user. And so all that popping around to the page, Google's basically said, hey, we're just not going to index sites that do that. And so that's a real issue for weather.com. I don't know anyone there. I'm not in touch with anyone there. They're not a client of ours. But the helpful content update is going to have a massive impact on their business. All right. We'll wrap up with number 3, ranking. So ranking is sort of how every page on the internet is scored after it's been crawled and indexed. And this is a mix of things we've covered elsewhere on this page and in other videos and blog posts at goapps.com and dodgeballmarketing.com and in the Dodgeball Marketing Podcast. But ranking is impacted by technical optimization, including using content, good content, on-page optimization, using the right keywords in your title tag and in your page content, especially that first paragraph, your H1s, your H2s, and in the inbound links pointing to that page on your own domain, the page speed, the page and the domain reputation, the content quality, and then offsite factors, things like your reputation. All of these things are going to factor into where a page is ranked. And so understanding your rankings is a key factor. We've had a lot of clients over the years press us and say, Michael, give me one number that I should watch. And I don't always go to organic traffic. Often I'll go to rankings because it's an earlier indicator of the direction of traffic. And it's what we focus on to grow in order to produce growth in organic traffic. So rankings can be a big, it's kind of, there's the risk of falling into following a head fake in just watching rankings. But if I'm forced to watch just one number, I would watch rankings and monitor organic traffic to make sure that it grows in the shadow of growing rankings. All right, the bottom line, how search engines work. Now that you have a basic understanding of how search engines function, you can take steps to optimize your site so your pages rank higher in search results. Hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you on the next one.